Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about a technique that artists use to rough in subject matter onto their paper or block it in a really quick way that helps to get about the right size and about the right place and about the right shape all really quickly. We're going to practice it today and I'm going to take you step by step. So it's going to take longer than it would to actually do it once you know how to do it. But this is a really quick process to get about the right size, in about the right place, and about the right shape for all your work. So we're going to be doing this technique a lot this year in class. I'm going to be drawing this sanitizer bottle. So it's something that I see a lot in my day because I use it a lot, and you probably use a lot yourself. I'll be drawing it onto this paper, and I want to draw it in a way that it has about the right size relationships of height to width that my original bottle has onto this piece of paper. To do that, I'm going to be using the underlying shapes technique. There are different techniques for doing this, but the underlying shapes technique takes geometric shapes like squares, rectangles, ovals, and circles and triangles, and you look for those basic shapes in the arrangement of the parts that makes your object. On my object here, it's basically rectangular in its structure, especially the body of it. Even here there's a smaller rectangle and then another longer rectangle side to side, a rectangle here, and then even maybe a long rectangle that way. So there are rectangles on top of rectangles on a rectangle, okay? So I'm going to start with the big and go to the small, and that's how you should work too. Bigger helps you to rough it in about where it belongs, and then going smaller helps you to get the right size of smaller things for details. So as you're working, you're going to be doing some problem solving. How wide does it need to be for how high it is? Most rectangles, all rectangles are different in their ratios of height to width, and they're all thin, right? A rectangle is just a piece of paper or drawn or painted on a piece of paper, so it doesn't have any depth like my object here does. That comes a little bit later after I rough it into its underlying shapes, okay? So when I draw this, I don't want to draw it so it's too close to the outer edges, but I want to make it big on the paper, which is what I want you to do too. I'm going to put the top of it no higher than that, about a ½ inch from the top of the paper down. By the way, you should be using an HB pencil. It's dark enough that you can see, but not so dark that you can't easily erase it once you're done. You will be doing a lot of erasing. The bottom of it I want to be no lower than about ½ inch from the bottom too. So I'm just putting in some marks where I want it to fit within on my paper. It could be a big piece of paper, making it really big, or I can draw it on a smaller piece of paper, making it really small. Those are my options, but for this project, you're filling the page as much as you can with a little space above and below. If your object is longer side to side than it is tall, then of course you would turn your paper on its side for horizontal, so you could draw the object that way. This object is taller than it is wide though. Okay, so the top of it's going to go here, the bottom of it is going to go here, and the rest of it's going to fit inside it. It's basically a rectangle that's a little narrower than it is tall by kind of a bunch. So I'm going to measure, just kind of guessing, this distance here is about half of the distance from top to bottom. So when I put in my measurement, I'm going to do just the same thing. First off, I'm going to draw the whole thing in as a rectangle. So I'm going to guess that the distance here is about half of the distance up to the top of that, or almost 3 of this, okay? So the width, I'm going to guess, how about right there and there? So that might be a little too narrow, but I can adjust for it. I'm doing what's called the comparative measurement technique, a comparative measurement technique, where whatever is between there, I rotate it, and I use that as my unit of measurement. There's 1, 2, and about 2/3. So that's a little bit too much. So I'm going to take a little off of this side and a little off of this side, and I'm going to use the inner edges as my unit of measurement for comparing the size relationships of its height to its width. So those are my new measurements. I'm going to measure between my fingers or on the outer edges of my fingers. I could use my pencil, but I'm going to just use something I have convenient like this, all right? And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be close. 1, 2, 3. That's a little too narrow. So somewhere between my first marks and my second marks. Okay, so I'm taking out the inner ones and leaving the outer ones, and that looks about right. This is problem solving that you're going to be wanting to do too. So I'm measuring 1, 2, and about 3. So that one, right? There's one. Use the outer edge of my fingers. So it's 1, 1, 2, and about 3. So that's really close. That's comparative measurement, which is a different thing than what we're doing here, but it helps me to establish how wide I want the rectangle to be. I'm going to go ahead and take it all the way to the top, even though it doesn't here, for its side edges. That'll just help me to fit everything else in appropriately. So I'm going to draw in a line that goes through this left side at the marks that I measured. Right there it is. And then on the right side too. But you shouldn't have to. It should go quicker than even what I just did. Okay? So there's a rectangle that this can fit into, and I can modify it later. I can make it look less like it's wavy and dancing. I can tell you that that will bother me right there, so I'm going to fix that right now. All right? So that's more straight up and down right there. All right, so there's my basic structure of that bottle so far. So now I'm going to modify it to add in other stuff. This ratio is about right. Now I know that 2 of this distance made this distance to its shoulder right here. So here's my measurement, 1, 1, and 2. So here's about the shoulder of my dispenser at the front edge. The back edge is going to be a little bit higher because it's farther away. So now that's the structure here. Basically blocking it in, roughing it in into a basic geometric shape, a rectangle. Now this part is a rectangle too, and it could be extended all the way to the top, but I'm not going to bother. The distance from here to here, this top ring is probably about half of the distance from bottom to top, right at that top ring at the front. So I'm going to measure that and double check. 1. Yeah, so this distance from here to here is about the same as from here to here. So, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to divide it in half so it looks to be about the same, right in the middle of the object. So here's the center core of it, right? So half of that's going to be on this side, half's on this side, and it looks like it's fitting just fine. That's the front edge, so it doesn't go quite that far. It comes down to about there, goes up about half of the distance. From there up to there is about half the distance to this edge. It's a rectangle, or maybe a square. It would be a rectangle if it went all the way to the shoulder, but I brought it up a little bit for this distance. Okay. Now I'm going to put in another smaller rectangle right here that goes a little bit above that one. Okay, that's for this part from here to there at the back. All right, a little bit higher probably. So a smaller one, the distance here that's not occupied should be centered, right? So I want to make sure that it occupies about the same, and I rough it in. If it's a little unneat, not a big deal, we can correct for that. Now I'm going to draw a rectangle that goes from here all the way to the top of it, which is all the way to that line there. It's a rectangle, it's not just a line, a single line, it's a shape. Okay, that's this. And then there's another one that is wider here and a little less and a little less. So I'm going to put those in. There's the wider one and the narrower one. All right, so it kind of steps upward and gets wider as it goes upward as it pumps down, right? This is the stem that's inside. So we don't see all of that other one. I'm going to get rid of the original one just because it could confuse me. I'm not worried at this point about it being pretty. I'm just worried about it, or concerned about it being about the right size, about the right place, and about the right shape. Then I can modify it later and make it more perfect. All right? So now I've got that. The pump part of it stops there and comes a little bit toward me. And the back edge of it here is lined up with this edge right here. So its back edge is there. Your view is a little different. Okay, just know that. And it goes as an angle this way and comes toward me this way. And it's basically another rectangle going back in space. And it doesn't come all the way to this edge. It's about 2/3 of the way over. It stops right about there for that edge in relationship to its side. And then it comes that way. And I don't see it going down because it has a little angle going away from me that I don't see inside of it. And the back edge, it does curve there, so I'm not going to do that now, but I would eventually. And it goes back in space to that back edge there. And then from this front corner, it's got another angle. It's almost a triangle going down and over. It's more like that. So there's my basic structure of that. Now I get rid of all the lines that don't belong, and I have my underlying shapes of my sanitizer pump, right? So I'm just going to get rid of some of those extra lines that don't belong. It'll save me time later. All right, get rid of those lines. Now I missed some right here. That's not really floating in air. There's an oval which is this shape, but it's a little skinnier from front to back, from here to here, as it goes back there. But it's an oval. That's a geometric shape too. So I'm going to start at this edge and just draw it in from corner to corner, and it goes down a little bit. Probably not as low as I just drew it, but something like that. It doesn't go up as high as what I just drew it. And I can change all of that later. So now I've got something that looks pretty close to the pump with all the parts in place, and it just needs to be modified to make it look like the real object. I'm going to get rid of the lines that don't really belong. So when I do the actual curves and directional changes, which we call contour lines, when I do them, I can do it more easily without second guessing myself. So that's the underlying structure of that. Those are the underlying shapes. So that's what you're going to do for our project. You're going to practice it first, and then you're going to go to the big paper after that. And that's our next step in another video. Good luck.